So we're going to start by setting this up the way we have been setting up all our faces from the front. This is what's called a planar head. It's a sculpture of a head that's been simplified, so that the curves are understood in terms of sort of flat planes. So let's begin by just making a kind of an egg. And remember, this is always not an effort to draw the actual shape of the head, but an effort to create what I call a placeholder. It's just a way to decide where we're going to put the head on the paper, if that difference makes any sense to you. So this is sort of where the head's going to go. It's really a mistake to try to draw the jawline at this stage, or the cheekbones, or the hair, or anything like that. It just sort of tells us where the head goes on the page. And the eyes are going to go across the middle of the head. This is how we always start. And these eyes are fairly wide set, I think you'd agree. So we're gonna leave extra space in the middle. And then the eyes themselves are normal size. And then we've got about an eye width to the cheekbone from the outside corners. So this unit, this unit, this unit, and this unit are all about the same, and we got a little extra space in the middle. And that's what we've been seeing in just about all the heads that we've drawn. Notice that the nose on this face is a little bit narrower than the space between the eyes. You see that? Well, it might be turned slightly, or it might just be defective. Seems like it's even on this side, and it is a little shorter on this side. I don't know, the head doesn't seem to be turned, but let's just draw what we see here. We've got a little gap here and no gap over here. And for the length of the nose, let's look at the shape of this rectangle, which is what we've been doing every time. And I would say that is about, if I picture a square, be about here. This is about 1 1/3 squares. So it's about 30% longer than it is wide. So try to copy that shape of rectangle. And we can see already that we're going to need some more length down to the chin, but we'll figure that out later. And we're going to very lightly block in where the eyes are going to go. And notice that these eyes have been understood for us by the artist in terms of straight lines. Can you see that? And it's a lot easier to see and to measure straight lines and angles than it is to draw curves. So look at how easy it is to understand these shapes in terms of straight lines. So we're going to draw just these basic shapes. Make sure you don't make them too big. And don't press too hard, please. Just try to do exactly what I'm doing. And we're going to do the same thing with the tip of the nose. We know where to put it, and we're just going to cut off these two corners and indicate where the tip of the nose is, like that. So we do this, 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 and this. And that's all we need to know about the nose right now. If if I compare the width across the nose, this width, to the distance between the bottom of the nose and the line between the lips, see how we end up with something a little shorter than a square? So we're going to just draw that shape to get down to the line between the lips. And then we're going to go into this with a little more detail and draw the Cupid's bow, but again, thinking of it in terms of straight lines instead of curves. So we've got this little V in the middle, and then we go down towards the outside corners of the box, and then we go up a little at the outside corners. I need to do that a little bit lower. I went a little above my line. It should be sort of centered on the line. And then we know that if this is 1/3 here, this is going to be 2/3 here, right? So this is a unit, and then we go 2 units, and that gets us to the bottom of the chin. Right, 1 and 2. I'm going to block in the cheekbones very quickly. Notice this one is a little closer to the eye, which does suggest there's a slight turn to this head. And I'm going to indicate the turn of the jaw, which has to be below the corner of the mouth, like that. And we're also going to block in the shape of the hair, which again, think of it in terms of straight lines. So I'm going to do it in red first. I'm simplifying it a little bit. And we're going to do the same thing with the neck. And the way I'm thinking about it is going to be, so here's this jawline. Here's where the hair starts. Notice it's right across from the center of the philtrum. So I'm going to go across from there, and that's where I'm going to start leaning out. This plane change is level with the bottom of the eye socket, right in here, and that's where I go more vertical. This plane change is level with the, well, it's sort of level with about here, the upper part of the forehead. And make sure you make this hair big enough. It's got to extend. The eyes have to stay in the middle, and then this hair extends above the cranium, so make sure that your eyes end up being below the center of this overall mass. And those are my main plane changes and my main proportions. And except for the hair part, this is all stuff that you have memorized, so it should be not incredibly difficult. And right here is where we are going to switch gears and do something completely different. So don't go into any more detail than you see presently in in my drawing. Okay, I don't want to see anyone go ahead and start doing any shading, any more outlining of the lips, anything like that. Just leave it here. I'm going to come around and have a look at your work, and I'll be back to the video in a second. So our next move here is going to be really different because we're going to try to use the main shadow edge to help us understand this form better. And this is a strategy that's really useful in portraits because the minute you can start to see the portrait, the head in 3 dimensions, you're going to have a much easier time understanding any errors that you may have made in drawing the form. So I'm going to do it first in red again so that you can really see what I'm talking about. Let me get rid of these other lines first. And what we're going to try to do is we are going to draw this line. And I'm going to break it down for you. Notice that it is, because this is a planar head, this line is already more angular than it would be on a normal human face. And that's going to be a huge advantage to us, right? It's easier to draw. And what I'm trying to identify here are the places that the light does not reach directly. Remember, there's always reflected light. There's always places that the light can reach indirectly, but there's a main light source here, and I'm outlining the places that that main light source doesn't reach. And this seems really maybe pretty complicated, but it's not as bad as you think. So this here is by far the most challenging area. Notice that, like right here, what we're seeing is it's called a halftone. It's not a true shadow, because within the light there are planes that are facing the light really directly, and there are other planes that are facing the light less directly. And the ones that are not facing the light as directly are going to be a little darker, and that would include, like, see this plane here? That's a halftone, but it's not a shadow. Don't be confused. And I'm going to outline here and here. So everything over on that side and this are the shadows. Everything else is in the light. So here's your big challenge. Most people get a little lazy when they're drawing these shadow shapes. They don't think they're as important as the actual shapes of the features, but we want to be very attentive to them. We want to draw it as accurately as we can. So let's try to do this together now. See, I've got this plane change here, and this plane change here is right across from it. I should be ending up sort of above the eye, right about here. And don't think of this as like, oh, I'm drawing an eye now, I'm drawing a nose, I'm drawing a mouth. Think about it. Let's imagine that you were a cartographer and you had to draw a map of the state of Connecticut. You had to copy from another map and make your own map of Connecticut. All you'd be thinking about, if you're trying to copy the coastline, which is obviously really complex, is, you know, what's the angle and what's the distance? That's all you're thinking about. And if you can stay in that mindset when you're doing this, and get out of the mindset of like, how are you supposed to draw noses? How are you supposed to draw mouths, etc.? You're going to be much more accurate. I'm drawing this darker than I normally would so that you can see what I'm doing. Just try to do as much as possible what you see me doing, but if you can do it a little lighter, that would be even better. And this gets really easy after a while. That's the good news. I mean, it's just copying shapes and measuring distances and measuring angles. Anybody can do that. The main thing that, like I said, will hold you up is if you start thinking about like, oh, I don't remember how to draw noses. It's not about that. It's just about abstract pattern of light and dark. So that's it for the main shadow breaks. And now I've got this is the hard part, like I said, over here. I've got this shadow shape over here. Obviously, if you're drawing from life, you don't have the opportunity to outline all your shadows like this, but with a little training, you can see them just as clearly and easily as if they were outlined in red. Eyes give people a lot of trouble because people get that coloring book attitude and they're like, oh, it's the white of the eye, I can't shade that as white. And obviously that's not, like, your skin's pretty white too, most of you, but you shade your skin because it gets darker in shadow, and so do the whites of your eyes. So this is probably a little bit different than you approached it on the first day of school. What we're going to do now is first shading. And remember, if you are left-handed, your first shading looks like this. I'm left-handed, but because most of you are right-handed, I'm going to do my first shading the other direction, like this. And so most of you can do exactly what you see me doing right now. And notice that I'm shading right over the boundary between the head and the wall because this is all in shadow. So we're considering it all one big shadow area. Notice I'm not pressing hard and my tone is going on evenly because I am making so many lines. And my lines are staying parallel because I'm moving my entire arm. I'm not trying to do this with my wrist. That's why I'm using my right hand. If I was using my left hand right now, it wouldn't work to shade this direction. And notice also I'm not really going back and forth. I'm just shading on the downstroke. You'll have more control if you just shade on the downstroke than if you shade, grind it back and forth. So it's a good habit to get into. And remember too that this shading direction thing only applies to the first shading, does not apply to the second shading or the third shading. And our goal is to put down a nice even tone. And the objective here is that when you do that first shading, and I've got to switch to my left hand to do this area. Now you can look at your drawing and you can see your drawing as a volume, which you couldn't do before. Right? Like when you when you just see a bunch of lines, it's very hard to imagine it as a volume. When you shade, you can now see it as a three-dimensional form. You're giving your brain all the clues that you need to see it as a three-dimensional form. And as a result, if there are any problems with the form, even problems that you couldn't see when they were outlined, they're going to be really obvious to you. For example, in my form, like now that I've done my first shading, I can see that this plane change here is probably a little bit too close to the head. So I'm going to change that. And I want to challenge everyone to make at least one change in their drawing as a result of seeing it shaded. Just move one thing, that something's going to stand out to you that looks a little wrong now that you have a first shading. And I want to challenge you to make a correction based on that. If you shaded yours light enough, you won't have to do this, but now that my first shading is in, I'm going to just lighten or erase some of my shadow map so that I'm not fighting those hard outlines anymore. And you should always get in the habit of doing your shadow map so lightly that you don't have to do this step, but if your shadow map is really dark, you should probably do it. And I can erase some of my construction lines while I'm at it and prepare the drawing for second shading. When we get into second shading, we're going to zoom in onto features. So let me erase the markup from before. And we're going to zoom in on this eye socket. And so what we have right now is an indication of the shape of the eye, and it's nestled in this big dark area. So all we're doing now is we are darkening further the areas that stand out as a little darker than the rest of the shadow. And as we do that, we're going to be bringing out some of these forms. So notice that above this eyelid is a little darker, and under the eyelid is a little darker. And by putting both those darks in, now you can see the eyelid. I didn't never really outline the eyelid or draw it. All I'm doing is I'm shading around it until it stands out about the same in my drawing as it stands out in the photograph. This side of the nose is relatively dark, so I'm going to shade that. I'm going to start moving my pencil the direction that the nose moves. But I don't want this edge to be too sharp, so I'm going to go back along this edge with some little hatching lines that go the other way so that we can show that that form turns. You see this little light under the eye socket? We're going to bring that out by shading a little bit above it and a little bit below it. And we just produced that little bit of light without actually using an eraser or using any white. the lower lid shows because the bottom of the eyeball is a little darker than the top. So we're going to darken the bottom of the eyeball a little bit. And this really should feel less like outline drawing and more like sculpture, because we're using different values, different amounts of dark to push and pull the forms and to get them to turn. This whole side of the cheek is a little bit darker than the front of the face. And notice that through this whole area here, this whole zone, I'm basically not touching that because it's all sort of a middle gray. It's all similar to my first shading, so I don't need to do anything there. We're only touching the areas that get darker. I'm going to continue bringing this dark down along the side of the nose and around to the tip of the nose. And there's another little light on this corner between the, see there's a little darkening here and then a little darkening there, and there's a little light in between. Under the tip of the nose, this cast shadow is very dark, so I'm going to shade that pretty dark like that. And there's a little reflected light under the tip of the nose. I'm going to leave that alone, and I'm going to darken the upper part of the tip, leaving it just a little bit lighter underneath. Notice on the mouth there's some very clear reflected light. Some beautiful effects there that we want to get. I'm going to see if I can zoom in even more in the mouth. Okay, that's about as far as I can go. So I'm going to start with this really dark cast shadow under the upper lip. Try to keep up with me. Like, even if you can go back later, but if you fall way behind, you're not going to be able to learn from this. So there's that dark cast shadow, and here's a little bit of a core shadow. And notice, because it's a rounded form, I'm shading across the form like this. Just try to copy that shading direction. It really matters what shading direction you use. And notice in between is this little lightening, and that's the reflected light. It is shaded because we did do first shading there, but it's not as dark as what's above and below it, so it looks illuminated. This whole plane is a little bit dark. This cast shadow goes across the bottom lip right there, and probably a little more shallow of an angle there. And then this cast shadow under the bottom lip comes across and gets really dark through the upper half. Like that. A little lighter here, and then a little darker near the top of this shadow, and darker again at the cast shadow on the neck. And again, we've got reflected light here, we've got a little reflected light here, here, and here. All these surfaces that face down need to be slightly illuminated, and that's what makes it look like they're facing down and rounded. We are not touching any of our halftones yet. We're trying to do all our shadows first. All the true shadows, we want them all to be dark enough before we go into our halftones. When an area starts to look too splotchy, you see how there's too much contrast in this area? I can just go back to my first shading direction and just sort of lay another tone over the whole thing. And that evens it all out. You see how that works? You go right on top and just see there's too much contrast in my eye area, so I'm going to do the same thing there. And that unifies the shadow and pulls it all together for you. So this other eye is really almost done. The first shading really took care of most of what we need to worry about over here. I would say there's maybe just a little darkening under the eyelid here, a little sharpening of this shadow, a little darkening near the center of the eye socket. Okay, time to zoom out again. So don't forget to go darker on the shadow on the wall behind the object. And a good shading direction for walls is vertical, because it's a flat surface. That's going to show that it's flat, or horizontal works too, or both. But don't try curving your lines when you're on the wall, because you don't want the wall to look curved. And the shading gets much darker under the neck here. Again, with verticals and horizontals. And why is the wall so much darker than the head? Just because it's a darker shade of gray. That's called local color. And local color is not that important to capture. So if you do the wall not quite as dark as it really is, that's fine. It's not gonna. We want to use value to show the forms, and we're not that worried about using value to show that what color the wall is. Doesn't really make any difference. So just darken that somewhat. And once again, I'm going to go back to my first shading direction, and I feel like everything on the dark side needs to be a little more unified. And I'm starting to wish I had done this left-handed, because my hand's getting really tired from shading upside down, but and the further along you go, the more you can start to understand your drawing in terms of form. And the more easy it's going to be to see what sort of changes might need to be made. So just go ahead and make whatever alterations you think you need to the form based on what you're seeing in front of you. I'm going to give you some more time to work on these, but I want to wrap up this recorded demonstration. So we're going to skip ahead to the last step. After your drawing looks really good in terms of all your shadows, it's time to add the halftones. And you want to add the halftones using much lighter pressure than used for the shadows. So I can see like a halftone coming around here, and at this point I'm barely touching my paper. I can see a halftone under the eye socket, and again, very, very light. Your halftones aren't even as dark as your reflected lights. That's one of the hardest things to get right. Most beginners make the reflected lights way too bright, and they make the halftones way too dark. And the reason these halftones look as dark as they do is because they are surrounded with light. In the same way that the reflected lights are surrounded with dark, the halftones are surrounded with light, and that makes them look lighter than they are. So you just want to draw them very, very faintly, and just enough to bring out some of those plane changes on the light side. And that makes your drawing much easier to read. And after you do that, you might find more things more corrections you want to make, and you can go ahead and make them. And it becomes a process of bringing out the differences inside your shadows by adding contrast, and then going back and unifying those shadow areas when they get too contrasty by just doing that first shading direction again over the whole zone. I could obviously work on this for another hour and a half and make it look perfect, but I don't want the recorded portion of this demo to last any longer, so I'm going to press stop in a second and come around and look at your work. If you're working at home, please feel free to take as long as you want. Just pause the video and take as long as you want to continue refining your drawing.